one other thing I'll tell you about the story is that if you haven't read it, you will find that it is told from 8 different perspectives. Kind of moves over the course of the 10 days. You hear from the different characters in the tale. Now, when I originally designed the book, and I am an outliner, and you may remember this from hearing me talk about a Jill in Moscow, but once I have an idea, I will spend several years designing a book, thinking about all of its components, getting it to the point where I can really visualize the entire story in my mind. And then I will start to outline it in great detail. And that process takes at least a year, where ultimately I know every chapter, all the key events, the settings, the characters and their backgrounds. That's all laid out for me before I start writing chapter 1. Now, inevitably, once I dig in, things start to change. The outline starts to evolve. I make discoveries. I have changes in view of where the story should go. The story tells me more about where it should be headed instead of what I had originally thought. And in the case of the Lincoln Highway, the biggest example of this by far is that when I designed the story, it was going to be told from the perspectives of just 2 characters. Emmett, the young son of a farmer from Nebraska, and Duchess, who grew up in sort of a rougher set of circumstances in New York City as the child of a sort of actor con man, in essence. And it was going to go back and forth between these 2 characters as the 10 days unfolded. These 2 young men who have come to know each other through chance. And that's the way the story was going to be told. But once I got pretty deeply into the story, I found myself writing a particular section where I thought, you know what, this section really needs to be told from the perspective not of Duchess or of Emmett, but from the character Ulysses. And I wanted to tell a section from this suddenly from the perspective of a character named Pastor John. And that began to make me rethink the entire plan. And suddenly I thought, you know what, the character Sally deserves to be heard. The character Woolley deserves to be heard. Abernathy deserves to be heard, and Billy deserves to be heard. So the outline was retooled, and I actually went back to the beginning of the story, and in essence started again, revising and beginning to weave in these counter perspectives that ultimately I think give the story both its scope and its texture. I don't know how you'll feel when you finish it, but for me, it's hard to imagine at this stage that I ever conceived of the story as being told by just the 2 voices, because it's the richness of the 8 different voices that ultimately makes the book, I think, interesting structurally, artistically, and satisfying as a reading experience. At least that's what I hope. In closing, I guess I'll just make a quick personal remark, which is that I've wanted to write fiction all my life. It's really my primary dream since the time I was a boy. I was in 1st grade when I really decided I wanted to be a writer. And I've written for much of my life, most of my life, written fiction for most of my life. But I didn't get around to submitting a novel for publication until my mid-40s, and that was 10 years ago this summer when Rules of Civility came out. So in the second half of my life, as it were, I've had the extraordinary satisfaction and the luxury of being able to tell stories with the help of the publishing houses and the bookstores, and with people like you who've done it. So I owe you an expression of gratitude for helping, giving me the chance to have my dream come true. But finally, I'll just say that when you pick up the Lincoln Highway, if you pick up the Lincoln Highway, I hope you enjoy reading it as much as I enjoy writing it. Thanks so much.